Okay.
Yeah.
Can we go up to view at the top toolbar, view, and then slideshow, third one? Yeah. Yeah. There we go. There we go.
Okay. Do you want to sit here? And I've got the
so.
Zoom one from
The on
here.
camera, yeah.
And I also got the camera here.
That's my 15 minutes off 3 hours.
Okay. And
Coming up.
if you want, I'll remote control the slides.
Oh, okay. Well, I also have this, so
Oh, yeah,
let's
okay,
just see.
yeah.
Let me just see if it
In my
works.
case, yeah.
Yep.
Oh, cool.
Okay. Well,
Excellent. So we've got the professionals at work now. So thank you.
thanks, George. Yes. Well, friends, we are going to cover a lot of ground in the next 3 hours. First of all, just a note on the time schedule.
It's on the clock's over.
Okay, yeah. The first part is about 1 hour, so we'll go to about 6:45, 10 to 7, 6:45, then we'll break for about 40 minutes till 7:30, and then from 7:30 till about 9 o'clock, maybe a little later, depending on questions and answers. That's the schedule anyway. Okay, well, this is a very interesting title, a very interesting topic rather, and also a rather controversial one, because the authorities, the powers that be, basically have poo-pooed this for many years now, and according to them, if you believe them, it's just all conspiracy theory, hype, fantasy, blah blah blah, whatever. We shall see whether that's the case or not. Okay, but first we have to acknowledge your freedom to think for yourself. You have the free will to come to your own conclusions about any subject. Now, never forget one thing. This is extremely important. In fact, it's your God-given right, the gift of the Creator to yourself as a human being. And friends, never forget that you are endowed with this precious gift. Never, never, never. You can listen to this lecture, that lecture, this opinion, that opinion, read this book, that book, look at this YouTube video or whatever. But in the end, you have to make up your own mind. And as it is, so it is with this lecture. You'll have to come to your own conclusions about what I present here. Now, much of what I'm going to cover is or will be controversial in terms of mass consciousness and verifiable science. So there's a bit of a warning here. What you may be about to hear may be in stark contrast to what the authorities, the powers that be, are telling you or want you to know. So ultimately, you have to decide for yourself, and that's an important decision, an important option which you have. Okay, the information I'll be presenting here is from the Zeta Talk website. Zeta Talk is channeled by a lady living in Wisconsin in the United States named Nancy Leader. She has been cranking this stuff out since 1995. There's a tremendous volume of information on the Zeta Talk website. It's probably too much for a single individual to fully comprehend. But she's been doing it for a long time, and I present her photos so you can get a certain energy read. Whenever you see a person or see a photo of a person, you can get a certain idea of the energy which they present, their auric emanation, their vibrations. So I put Nancy's these photos up so you can tune in yourself and see what you think of her. Okay, Nancy claims to be in contact with a group of extraterrestrials or aliens called the Zetas. And they're called the Zetas because they come from the star system Zeta Reticuli. They live on a planet which is circulating around Zeta Reticuli. And they have been in contact with Earthlings since about 1947. And for those of you who've studied the phenomena of UFOs and ufology, you may remember that in July of 1947, there was the famous/infamous Roswell incident, where in the state of New Mexico, it was claimed that a downed UFO spacecraft had crashed, and then that was later denied by the government, the U.S. military in particular. And I can't go into Roswell in detail. That's a whole other subject, a whole other topic. Many, many books have been written about it. But basically, the gentleman here, this is an actual photograph of a Zetan taken sometime in the late 40s or 50s, we're not sure. This is a drawing. Artist impression, pretty similar. Now, the thing about the Zetas, which is interesting, is that they have developed, according to Nancy Leader, and I certainly believe this, they have developed the faculty of mental telepathy. And they claim to be able to tune into any mind and any human body on the earth and get what that person is actually thinking or even feeling. And that means they can cut through a lot of the propaganda hype, spin, nonsense, outright lies, which we're being bombarded with from many sources, as you may agree. So that's their unique talent, ability, whatever. They can go directly into a mind and through their telepathic abilities get information which you and I cannot. Okay, I've been studying the Zeta Talk information almost 10 years now. March of next year will make it exactly year 10. And I've concluded that the Zeta Talk info is accurate to about 90%. And sometimes a little more. Sometimes it's a little more accurate. Now that means that I don't view all the info on the website as the Word of God. And that's because there is an error factor of approximately 10%. Errors of one sort or the other. But it gets complex here because we may have to wait for some weeks, some months, or even years to verify whether any piece of info from Zeta Talk is accurate or not. So it becomes rather complex. All right. Nibiru is the most common name used today for the interstellar visitor. This word is of Sumerian and Chaldean origin, as I think George mentioned. Some writers refer to it as Nemesis. The search for Planet X is known to the astronomical and scientific community. What they don't know, or rather many of them do know, but they dismiss it as mere fantasy, is that Nibiru is Planet X. Nibiru is mentioned in the Old Testament Bible, and it's called wormwood there. In South America, the Spanish word commonly used is Hercolobus. So many names, but the same phenomenon. Nibiru, Nemesis, Planet X, wormwood, etc. All right, we talk about the basic facts and figures of Nibiru, of the composition of Nibiru. This is according to the Zeta Talk info. Most of this lecture is based on that. Nibiru is a strange hybrid. It's about 85% brown dwarf star, and the rest is a planet where water is a predominant element. From the surface of Nibiru, looking up, the sky would appear to be cream-colored. Nibiru is occupied by a race of humanoid beings known as the Anunnaki. And if you look on the internet, there's a whole lot of commentary, a lot of writing about the Anunnaki. Are they good? Are they bad? What are they doing here? What do they do in the past? A whole lot of information. Some of it perhaps is accurate, some of it not so accurate. Once again, you have to decide. You have to make up your own mind. The Anunnaki interaction with humans during past transits of Nibiru is a very complex subject. Currently, according to Zeta Talk, no contact between humans and Anunnaki is allowed. And that's because in the past, the most recent passage of Nibiru, there was some exploitation of humanity on the part of the Anunnaki. We'll get to that briefly. So, in the past, yes, it was allowed. Now, the door has been shut, the barrier has been put up. No interaction between humans and Anunnaki. Appearance. Nibiru is surrounded by a huge cloud of brown-colored dust, which obscures its visibility. So don't forget, it's mostly a brown dwarf star. Nibiru has 2 major moons and several minor moon clusters or moon swirls. And that's fairly important, and we'll get to that very soon. Its appearance in space resembles the form of a double helix. Nibiru has a long, long dust tail, which is brownish in color, which contains small rocks as well as the dust. The tail is highly magnetized and can swoop or waft, moving independently of Nibiru itself. Now, these photos are from NASA. This is from one of the telescopes. This is a close-up. So they've actually got photographs of Nibiru, and many of them are so we believe. But as may become apparent, NASA basically is denying that Nibiru exists. Doesn't exist, fantasy, nonsense, but yet they have the photographs as such. Okay, basic facts and figures. According to Zeta Talk, Nibiru is about 4 times the size of the Earth. Therefore, Nibiru is about as big as Uranus, which has a diameter of over 50,000 kilometers, or Neptune, which has a diameter slightly less. So it's a big object. in comparison to the planets in our solar system, certainly in comparison to the Earth, very big, 4 times as big. Incredibly, the mass or density of Nibiru is said to be 23 times that of Earth. That's because it has less silica or sand than on Earth according to the Zetas. That means that the gravitational pull and an electromagnetic field of Nibiru is far, far greater than that of Earth. But Zeta Talk does not give a figure for how much bigger. And this is incredibly important, and we'll see more, we'll cover why it's important and what the effects are as we get further into the lecture. Okay, Nibiru has a strange or eccentric interstellar orbit. It is in the shape of a huge ellipse or ovoid. One focus, which is a turning point of the orbit, is our Sun. The other focus or turning point is a dead star located far away in outer space. The periodicity or time sequence it takes to return to the same point in its orbit is somewhere between 3,600 and 3,650 years, Earth years. So it's a very long cycle, but it is recurring. It has happened before, it is happening now, as we'll see in the lecture. Okay, according to Zeta Talk, Nibiru entered our inner solar system in March 2003 on its latest transit, which is a slingshot or boomerang movement past the Sun. It's now heading out of the solar system, but located somewhere near the orbit of Venus. And because Venus is not that far from the Earth in astronomical terms, what does it mean? A body 4 times the size of the Earth, i.e. Nibiru, is having tremendous, tremendous influence and effects upon the Earth, as we shall see as we get further into the lecture. Effects and influence which are being denied by the powers that be, the scientists, the government, etc., etc. Okay, the last time Nibiru hit town or arrived in our inner solar system and influenced Earth and humanity, that was about 1600 to 1650 BC. What happened then? Well, there was a major eruption in the Aegean Sea. A volcano on the island of Thera, which is now known as Santorini, erupted. And this is a quote from Wikipedia. The island was the site of one of the largest volcanic eruptions in recorded history, the Minoan eruption, sometimes called the Thera eruption, which occurred about, guess what, 3,600 years ago at the height of the Minoan civilization. That eruption wiped out the city of Akrotiri in South Terra. And here you see some beautiful frescoes. I had the good fortune to visit Santorini, I think it was in the late 1990s, and I got to get to Akrotiri and saw some of the ruins and some of these beautiful, beautiful frescoes which are still preserved. They're thought to be from the Bronze Age. That would be sometime before the date of 1600 BC. Okay, when the volcano known as Terra Santorini erupted, it caused a gigantic tidal wave to form which moved south and then badly damaged the Minoan civilization on the island of Crete. And if you know your archaeology, the major city there was Knossos. Once again from Wikipedia, it may have led indirectly to the collapse of the Minoan civilization on the island of Crete, which was hundreds of kilometers to the south, through a gigantic tsunami. If you have studied anything about Crete, and especially the archaeological discovery of Crete, I think it was Sir Arthur Evans around the early part of the 20th century, you may remember that there's a theory of belief that the Minoan civilization disappeared very quickly. There 1 minute, gone the next. Why does it happen? Why did it happen? No one really knows. According to Zeta Talk, it was because this gigantic tidal wave generated from the eruption of the Santorini volcano hit Crete, hit Knossos, destroyed the civilization. So meanwhile, down in Egypt, to the south, Moses, who was the leader that the Hebrews were struggling with battled Pharaoh to let my people go. According to what I believe and what some theorize, 9 of the 10 plagues of Egypt from the Bible related in one way or to the other to the approach of Nibiru and its effect on Earth in that era, which is approximately 1600 BC. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
No.
The eruption of the Thera volcano produced a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. And according to the Old Testament, if you've read that, guided Moses and the Hebrews after they left Egypt and wandered in the desert. My personal belief is that Moses, the leader of the Hebrews, was an initiate of the mystery schools of that era. He knew about the approach of Nibiru. He knew what was causing these plagues of frogs and boils and sand and so on to appear in Egypt. And he used this as a tool to pressure Pharaoh to let the people go. And according to tradition, they'd been enslaved at that point in time for about 400 years. So they were ready to leave. They were ready to leave. And Moses was the man sent by God, if you want. I have no problem with that, to get him out of Egypt. And so he did. All right, nearby in Old Chaldea and Samaria, which is present-day Iraq, there was some interaction between humans and the Anunnaki, who lived on Nibiru. Now, Zedetok states that some of the interaction was positive, but most was negative. The Anunnaki are said to be about 8 or 9 feet in height, and humanoid, and some took advantage of humans by enslaving them. At that point in time, interaction was permitted, but not now. You may remember the story from the Bible of Samson. Samson, the strong man, seduced by Delilah, eventually came to his death. According to the Zedetok material, Samson was born from a father who was Anunnaki and a mother who was human. That's where he got his strength. Because when your daddy is 8 or 9 foot tall, he's going to be a lot stronger than your ordinary male walking around. Believe it or not, make up your own mind. Meanwhile, in China, Nibiru was having an eye-popping effect on the climate and local landscape. And this is preserved in Sichuan province Longai pottery from the Samsung ancestral ruin site. Now, interesting stuff. This little gentleman here, his eyes are popping out. These are also popping eyes. And then you see these big ears here. Okay. The elongated ears refer to hearing clapping sounds or trumpets thundering in heaven caused by Nibiru's passage. And we'll talk about recent examples of that a little further on in the lecture. Once again, this was 1600 BC, approximately, when all this happened. Across the water in Japan, ancient Jomon pottery depicted the sloshing of the waters on all sides of the island caused by the extreme tidal waves unleashed by the passage of Nibiru. And here we see, basically on all 4 sides the waves are rising up, preserved in pottery. A record of what happened about 3,600 years ago, the last passage of Nibiru by the earth. Okay, now some extraterrestrial visitors came. They were given the name Dogu by the Japanese, who helped care for survivors in Japan after the Nibiru passage. Does this remind you of a space helmet, maybe? What about that? So once again, we have this pottery, this record in clay, that something definitely was happening around 1600 BC, which we believe to be the passage of Nibiru and its huge effect on the Earth and its population. Okay, what about photos of Nibiru? Well, Nibiru has rounded the sun on its journey out of our inner solar system. That means it's only visible near or very close to the sun itself. That means it's only visible around sunrise or sunset, dawn or dusk, on any given day. It only appears as a small speck of light, generally speaking. Now, because of that, some, or probably the better word to be used would be many have dismissed the entire concept of the existence of Nibiru, claiming that it should be generally visible to the public at large, especially amateur astronomers. But that isn't so according to Zedetok. Okay. Sunrise in late June 2003 in China. Where's Nibiru? It's right here. In the northern hemisphere, Nibiru appears at approximately the 4 p.m. section of the sun, or dial of the sun, face of the sun. Here in the south, it's the opposite. Here in the southern hemisphere, it's usually up here. Here's a good shot from New Zealand in 2011. Fairly obvious something was going on. But skeptics might say, well, that's just a lens flare, just a dot of light. Doesn't mean anything, doesn't prove anything. This is very interesting. Eric Trump, the son of President Trump, in March 2018 posted this photo twice on his social media page. Sunrise over Trump's golf course in D.C. Where's Nibiru? Well, it's pretty obviously here, isn't it? But once again, hey, that could just be a lens flare. It doesn't mean anything. Let's take a close-up or a color enhancement of the Eric Trump photo. You see something definitely going on there. But once again, skeptics might say, yeah, just a lens flare. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't prove anything, etc. Nibiru sometimes appears as a second sun beside the sun, our soul. That's due to the sun's light bouncing off of the dust cloud that covers Nibiru. Now, I don't know when these photos were taken. I don't even know where. It's a little strange because Nibiru is appearing up here, and normally it should be down here or up there. So it's a bit of a mystery, which I can't explain. But I'll just present that to you to make up your own mind. This is interesting. In March of 2011, in Taiwan, a very clear second sun appeared in the sky, and it was reported in the television news. This actually is a frame from that newscast in China, or Taiwan rather. So something's going on here. But what is it? As far as I know, the newscast from Taiwan did not say, well, this is Nibiru and it's appearing as a second sun, blah, blah, blah. They just said, well, something strange is going on. Here's the photos. We don't know what it is, so you can make up your own mind. Okay, as Nibiru continues its outward journey from the inner solar system, it's becoming increasingly visible from Earth, but the images are still far from spectacular. Now this, as you can see, is from Mexico, sunrise in late March of 2019. Once again, a little dot there, and maybe see the enhanced photos there. But nothing spectacular, certainly nothing spectacular. And here's Italy, March of the same year, 2019. Once again, there's something going on, but hey, it could be a lens flare, right? It could be a dust speck, who knows? Nothing spectacular, nothing conclusive. Now, here's some interesting recent images of Nibiru. This was Air Force One, which the jet in which the presidents jet around, from August of last year. Reflection off the nose, the front part of the plane. You can definitely see two images there. Here's one from Vermont in July of 2019. One from Wales a month earlier. And we've got quite a few of these photos, actually. Local news reports them, but the mainstream media does not. So you might get a photo in the local Welsh paper, the local Vermont newspaper, or whatever, saying, yeah, we got this really strange photo from, Mr. Smith last week, and he wanted to share it, so here it is. We don't know what's going on, but here's the photo, and make up your own mind. But that's not being reported at the higher levels of the mainstream media, for obvious reasons. Here's probably the most spectacular image of Nibiru we have to date. It's sunrise over Cincinnati, Ohio, early October 2019. Something definitely going on there. But, once again, as far as I know, it wasn't claimed or discussed that this was a photo of Nibiru next to the sun. That wasn't done. It was posted on, I think, Facebook. Once again, a big question mark. Well, there's something interesting happened over Cincinnati, so what is it? Okay, and this is a photo that Graham Bishop sent to me in early September, I believe it was. This is from Queensland, Sunshine Coast, Queensland, late August of this year, 2020. This is the sun here. Is this Nibiru here? Well, not quite. This is the tail of Nibiru reflecting the light of the sun. And you can see the light is being reflected on the water as well. And it's sort of an amorphous light. It's not, this is clearly defined. That's, a nice sphere, so that's definitely the sun. This is sort of an amorphous light. It sort of doesn't really have any boundary, which is exactly what you would expect from reflected light from the tail of Nibiru, the dust tail of Nibiru, hitting the Earth. So I thank Graham very much for submitting a photo. Thanks, mate. Great photo, and congrats to your friend for catching what I believe to be a legitimate capture of Nibiru, or at least the Nibiru reflecting the light of the sun on that date, late August 2020. Okay, now we start to look a little bit deeper. We see that Nibiru has been having quite a bit of influence all over the Earth in various fields of understanding, research, whatever. Okay, the magnetic pole of Earth is shifting much faster than scientists can explain. And here you see a diagram from 1900 to here, 2020, the last 120 years. And you can see that from 1900 to 1920, it moved very little. Then from 1920 to 1940, it seemed to pick up speed, and then it really got going from about 1980, 1990, 2000. Now it's really, really moving fast. Far and fast. Scientists cannot explain this, why this is. You can read theories maybe on the internet. Opinions, theories, but there's no unanimity. They don't really know. But the Zetatov explanation is the north magnetic pole of Nibiru is pushing hard on the north magnetic pole of Earth, forcing it, our north magnetic pole, to move further and faster than it would be expected. That's the Zetatov explanation. That's the Nibiru explanation for those of us who believe in this phenomenon. And guess what, folks? There's been increased volcanic activity on the Earth since 2003. That's 2009. You can especially see in 2008, 2009, it really started to shoot up. And this is from these, this is another diagram here. And you can see once again, 2010, it's really at a peak. So Nibiru, yes, it's having a big effect on planet Earth. Very big, very massive. But you and I and the masses of millions and billions of people who read their daily Herald Sun or The Age or whatever are not being told about this. Also, increased earthquake activity. You can see it here on this map. Sort of go along sort of straight, and then it starts to shoot up. And if you follow the news at all, you will know or have known that past few years, many more earthquakes than usual are hitting our planet with a greater and greater destructive force. And we'll talk about a little bit later how the authorities are dumbing down the actual magnitude. They're not reporting the actual magnitude, they're dumbing it down by a factor of about 2. That's in the second part of the lecture. Once again, we believe all this is due to Nibiru's influence on the Earth, but you have to decide for yourself. This is a very interesting subject, and a very critical one, because hardly a week goes by, sometimes hardly a day goes by, without the subject of climate change being discussed in the mainstream media. As you would know if you follow it at all, it's a hot topic. Okay, there seem to be 3 scenarios pushed by various groups in this discussion. These are the 3 major theories or beliefs. Number 1, climatic changes and apparent weather extreme weather events being witnessed all around the Earth now in recent years. They're not unusual or alarming. Just part of the usual timely changes in the Earth's weather. You find them especially among the right wing of politics, the National Party in the States and in federal Parliament Canada. That's their view. It's nothing unusual, just part of the usual change. So, nothing to get excited about. Okay, this is the most common view, or theory. Climatic changes, extreme weather events, are directly related to global warming, in particular the greenhouse gases, which is carbon dioxide, man-made carbon emissions, being pumped into the atmosphere on a daily basis. We've heard about that quite a lot, even if you don't follow the news, in recent months and years. And then third, what might be called a conspiracy theory view is that many climatic changes and most extreme weather events are caused by cutting-edge secret technology being used by governments, in particular HAARP, and many HAARPs located in various regions of Earth. HAARP, in case you're not familiar, is a big project which is originally, it still is, based in Alaska. And it refers to high oral II, something like that. But anyway, it does exist, and conspiracy theorists are saying, no, nothing to do with global warming, it's all to do with HAARP. Now let's look at each of these theories in turn and see why they are not correct. Okay, I prepared this list the last time I gave this lecture was October of last year, October 2019. As you can see, October 2019. I won't go into the details for the next 3 slides. You can read the headlines for yourself. It's pretty obvious, folks, that we are witnessing extreme climatic events. There doesn't seem to be much doubt about that, although certain people still believe it's just natural, normal cycle, nothing special. And what have we seen recently? What have we seen just in the last day or two? Fiji getting hit by a cyclone with wind speed of up to 345 kilometers. My wife and I were watching television a couple of days ago, and I said, 345 Ks? That's unheard of. That's unheard of. I've never heard that figure before. Up to 200 Ks, yes. 345, no. Never heard that. Thank you very much. You may be aware, if you follow the news, that in New South Wales, northern New South Wales and southeast Queensland, they recently had unseasonably heavy rains causing flooding in places, small towns like Condom to Mulgum, whatever. But look back in time just 1 year, December of 2019, what were we seeing? We were seeing just the opposite. We were seeing heat waves hitting that part of the world, causing a lot of the terrible bushfires which this nation experienced during its last summer season. And we'll be talking about the true causes of that, which have nothing to do with global warming, a little bit later. So it's a long, long list. In fact, I could give a lecture for an hour, 2, 3, just one weather event after the other, the last 2, 3, 5 years. The list is long, practically endless. Going back a little further in time to November 2018, October 2018, Hurricane Michael in the Caribbean Sea hit Florida, created a lot of havoc, 15 deaths, 15 more deaths in Central America. That was a little 14 months ago. Go back even further, Hurricane Florence, typhoon or cyclone Mangkhut hit the Philippines, record-breaking floods in Kerala in southern India, bushfires hit the coastal area of Attica in Greece, which created quite a lot of havoc. 100 persons died. The event is considered the second deadliest bushfire forest event of the 21st century, second only to what we had here in Victoria in February 2009, namely Black Saturday. It's a long, long list. With each passing week, and with each passing fortnight, and each passing month, we get further addition to that very long list. Extreme climatic weather events. They are a reality, folks, not fantasy, not fiction, not some weird conspiracy theory thought up by someone in an office somewhere in Paris or London or Sydney. No. Okay, here's the second opinion. Greenhouse gases in the global warming model are heating up the atmosphere, and this is widely presented in the media and by politicians. In fact, you hear about it all the time. Debate, political debate, is Labour going to do anything about climate change? Yeah, they're going to push for a certain percentage of mandatory renewable energy supplies by the year 2030, 2050, whatever. Liberals and nationalists are saying, no, we're not going to do any of that. We're already on target to meet greenhouse gas emissions. Thank you very much. It's a complete lie, of course. But anyway, this whole theory about global warming and greenhouse gases, pretty well discounted by the record-breaking cold temperatures that hit Chicago in the U.S. in February 2019. 21 persons died. Chicago became colder than parts of Mars at that point in time. And here's some of the frozen water, Lake Michigan, I think it is, around Chicago. If we're in a global warming cycle, we shouldn't be getting record-breaking cold in this region, that region, the other region, whatever. But we see that year after year in the winter seasons, in Europe, in the UK, in the United States, year after year after year, record-breaking cold snaps in this part, that part, whatever. And here's the third view, the conspiracy view, namely that HAARP installations like the one in Tacoma, Alaska, they use cutting-edge technology to experiment with weather control, and they thus cause climatic change extremes. Well, that kind of is blown out of the water when you think that in 2015, thanks to President Obama's executive order, control of that HAARP facility passed from the U.S. Air Force to the University of Alaska. And this is what the Kona HAARP facilities look like. Still there, but no longer run by the military, they're run by the university. Now, folks, the million-dollar question. No, make it a billion-dollar question. Now, make it a trillion-dollar question, or even more. How have the powers that be and the mainstream media, and they're owned by the multimillionaires and billionaires that I term the predatory elite, that's my little pet phrase for them, how have they gotten away with misinforming the public about what is really going on? Well, the common term is climate change. I prefer to use the phrase climatic change extremes. It's through a very cunning, seductive equation which underlines all comments on the matter, but it's never actually stated. And this is the equation. Climate change equals global warming. Climate change equals global warming. You never see this printed. You never see it discussed as an equation. Although sometimes when people talk about climate change, they'll refer to global warming, so they're sort of interchangeable for some people. And as stated, never been printed or explicitly stated as such by politicians or the media. And that is because, and here comes the cleverness of this, devilishly clever, extremely clever. One part of the equation is verifiable, true, and correct. The other part is non-verifiable, false, and incorrect. But which is which? Which is which? You have to make up your own mind in that case. Can you also acknowledge the extreme cunning and evil genius of the predatory elite in getting millions and millions of persons around the world to accept this unwritten, unspoken equation as true and scientifically accurate? Wow. That's a really good one. That's a really amazing falsehood they've trapped millions and billions of people in the world to accepting. Not bad. Not bad. If you like misinformation, if you like disinformation, this is a work of genius. Make no mistake about it. Okay, what's the Zeta Talk explanation? There exists a daily Earth wobble. This is caused by the interaction of Nibiru with the Earth's north magnetic pole. That's the real cause of global climatic change extremes and destructive weather events. And now, with the help of my little Barcelona Football Club soccer ball, I'll explain how this works. Let's see. We'll imagine that the Barca symbol is the north pole of the Earth, and of course the south pole directly opposite. Nibiru is somewhere over here where the computer is. Now, what happens is the Earth rotates on a 24-hour basis, as we know. When the magnetic north pole of the Earth comes over the horizon, or at least starts to face the north magnetic pole of Nibiru, there's a push, because in magnetic terms, like repels like. Opposite attract, north attracts south, but like north and north, or south and south repel. So the Earth's magnetic pole gets pushed like that. And then as the rotation continues, there's a bounce back of the pole as it resumes its normal position in the sky. And this happens on a 24-hour cycle. Push from Nibiru, and then as the Earth continues to spin, the bounce back, and then it happens again. That's why you're looking at a figure 8. If somehow you could put a gigantic paintbrush on the North Pole of the Earth, or on the South Pole, and somehow have some gigantic canvas to record that paint, you'd see it making a figure 8 on a daily basis. Figure 8. This, folks, is the daily Earth wobble. This is the Nibiru explanation for climate change. How so? It's a daily Earth wobble which started with Nibiru's entry into the solar system in March 2003, has been getting more extreme ever since. It's a real cause of global climatic changes. And those include both record-breaking hot and cold temperatures. We're getting records of heat, yes, we're also getting records of cold. The daily Earth wobble explanation is anywhere on the globe when the movement exposes that region to more sunlight than usual. And don't forget, when the Earth starts to wobble on its axis in a strange way, some parts get more exposure to the sun, some aspects of the Earth, usually on the opposite side, get less. What happens when a particular region gets more exposure to sun? Well, there's a rise in the temperatures. But the reverse is also true. When a region receives seasonally less sunlight than normal, there's a drop in the temperatures there, sometimes very much below the average. And that, friends, is why we are seeing extremes, often record-breaking, of both hot and cold temperatures in any given region, and often within the same year. But the scientists, climate change experts, who are under the control and management of the predatory elite, simply will not tell us the truth in that regard. And that's because the whole subject of Nibiru has been subject to a cover-up since 1983. That'll be explained more in part 2 of the lecture. All right, let's take the recent example of Calgary, which is the capital of the province of Alberta in Western Canada. I personally lived in the province of British Columbia to the west of Alberta for many years, so a little bit familiar with Alberta. And also, take a look at this little city here called Grande Prairie. That's something very, very interesting happened there in 2018. But let's look at Calgary first. On August the 11th, 2018, Calgary experienced highest temperature on record. 36.4 shortly after 5 p.m. Previous record was 36.1 back in 1919 and again 1933. Now 36 degrees is not that much to boast about in Australia. We regularly get that in any summer in Victoria or most other states as well. But in Canada, because it's so far north, and because the weather is usually cold, that was a record for Calgary. Okay, what happened 2 months later? In October 2018, Calgary got record-breaking snowfall for that time of year. Now this is a headline from a Calgary local paper. We may be only 11 short days in the month of October. Thanks to the immense amount of snowfall we saw earlier this month, we have already broken some weather events. 45 centimeters of snow falling in one day on October 2nd comes as no surprise that the few flurries we have been seeing, or have seen since, have put us over the edge. So, record-breaking heat in August 2018 to record-breaking cold 2 months later. This is the reality. Extreme, from one extreme to the other. Here's a chart of weather patterns in the U.S. in February 2019. You can see from this side, half of the U.S. was warmer, the other half was wetter. Back to 2014, this is cooler, this is higher. But what do we see? It's sort of a serpentine pattern, isn't it? Sort of a snake-like pattern. Now, how can we relate that to the daily Earth wobble? Well, if you pick any particular point on the Earth and you start to track its motion through space, as viewed from space, what do you get? You get a serpentine pattern. The figure 8 movement of the pole translates to a serpentine pattern for any particular location on Earth. And this is very important as well. Due to the interaction of the gravitational and electromagnetic fields of Nibiru and the Earth, the molten core of the Earth is heating up. And this is an extremely significant, critical factor, vital factor in the reported heating of oceans and land masses. As we know, the Great Barrier Reef off the coast of Queensland is bleaching and dying, and it's getting bleached and dying faster than scientists have expected. This is no controversy about that. That's fairly well known. However, what is the cause of the bleaching and dying of the Great Barrier Reef? Well, sorry folks, nothing whatsoever to do with man-made greenhouse gas emissions and the global warming theory. It's because the molten core of the Earth is heating up and causing the waters in many parts of the world to heat up as well. What happens to coral when the temperature rises even half a degree or 1 degree? They die. This is the real cause of the bleaching of the Great Barrier Reef. Nothing whatsoever to do with the global warming theory. Sorry folks, just a cover-up, a fantasy, a diversion. Now, the boundary between day and night at any given time and place on Earth is a line or division called the solar terminator, which you can see. And as the Earth rotates, it moves from sunlight into darkness and back to sunlight. Fairly well-known fact. Okay, guess what? Something really interesting happened in Siberia in northern Russia on summer's day in July 2018. They experienced night-like darkness in the middle of a summer's day. And these are photographs from Siberia, that region, the remote Evino, whatever it is, Zygansky and Verkhozansky districts of Siberia, saw their day turn into complete darkness for almost 3 hours on July the 20th. The region got dark between 11:30 and 2 p.m. How do we explain that? Well, most of the authorities didn't even try. It was too bizarre, too strange, so they didn't bother. This is from Zetatalk. Did the globe have a severe wobble on July the 24th? Should have been July the 20th. Enough to cause a temporary day and night for a part of Siberia. At high noon, when sunlight should be expected for the duration of the day, the Zygansky period of Siberia went pitch dark. This gloom was not caused by cloud cover, despite any claims made to excuse the obvious wobble. Okay, that was the cover story. There was a cloud cover and it got all dark. Gee, folks, July is the middle of summer in Siberia and Russia. I don't think that even a huge cloud cover on a July day would have been responsible for this darkness. That's nonsense. But guess what? The next month, August 2018 in Canada, the same thing occurred at two places, Grand Prairie, we mentioned that previously, and Valley View in central Alberta. Namely, darkness appearing during the middle of a summer's day. Noon, 3 p.m. 2 p.m., 2:30 p.m., and then starting a little after 4 it began to go. So same thing happened. The Earth wobbled so badly that it crossed the solar terminator into night where night normally would be for those few hours. Now, I'm Canadian. You may have noticed my accent. I'm Canadian, so I notified my friends in Canada saying, well, guess what? This is what happened in Canada. And my friend said, oh yeah, they claimed it was the bushfires in British Columbia that were causing this. Yes, there were bushfires in British Columbia, the next province, when this happened. But no, sorry folks, bushfires are not responsible for this turning into this. Simply doesn't happen. The bounce back. The daily Earth wobble and the bounce back from the previous day's polar push. The bounce back on this day, 17 August, went too far. The globe compensated by fleeing to the north. Thus, for a few hours, day became night for the pleasant residents of central Alberta. Gee, Prime Minister Trudeau, what happened? Well, no worries, mate. Just a bit of smoke blew in from British Columbia from the bushfires there. But don't worry. Nothing to get excited about. Friends, we're living on a planet that is rocking and rolling and shifting and shaking and moving like it hasn't for the last 3,600 years. And to explain it, we've got to look at the tectonic plates of the Earth, which are in major movement. And here's basically an outline of those plates. See, it's a complex subject. Some are small, some are bigger. Here we are in Australia on a plate that extends up to India. We'll see more about it in the next slide. And these plates are moving because of the daily Earth wobble of the planet, which is caused by the influence of Nibiru. That's what we believe. But of course, you're not being told about this tectonic plate movement. The powers that be don't want you to know. Okay, let's look at our little plate here, the Indo-Australian plate. It extends right over to the eastern edge of New Zealand, the northern island of New Zealand. That tectonic plate cuts through the space between North and South Island of New Zealand, and then pushes down to Antarctica. We're entirely on this plate, the Australian landmass, and it also includes India. They're two separate plates, but they move together as one, so they're called the Indo-Australian plate. Now, according to Zetatalk, this plate, our plate, is a break for all the tectonic plates around the world, and when it moves, as it has been moving, the breaks come off right around the world. And that's what's been happening for the last few years. Can anyone forget last summer and the huge, terrible bushfires that afflicted huge areas in 3 different states? What does Zetatalk say about that? So quote, Australia is dealing with plate movement consequences as the Indo-Australian plate is pushed under Tibet. Okay, let me back up a little bit to explain that the right side, the eastern edge of our plate, is moving up. The western edge is moving down. As the eastern edge moves up, the plate to the right of us, which is the Pacific plate, subducts or moves under the eastern edge. And the same thing happens as to the western part of our plate. As our plate, as this edge goes down, it subducts or moves under the African plate, which is causing movement in Africa. It's a complex motion, not being discussed, not being talked about in the media. Okay, the Indo-Australian plate is pushed under Tibet. It lifts at the New Zealand edge. The New Zealand edge is the eastern edge of our plate. New Zealand is lifting up, and the western part of the Indo-Australian plate, several hundred kilometers off the coast of WA, is moving down. It creates a void under the plate that hot molten lava rushes to fill. This Tipperary river of lava is heating Australia and warmed ocean currents to the east of New Zealand. Ah, now that's interesting. So you mean that there's no link between the bushfires and human-made carbon dioxide emissions into the atmosphere or biosphere? According to Zetatalk, no, there is not. But the eastern edge moving up, creating a void, magma from the core rushing in, and heating up the states of Victoria, especially Gippsland, New South Wales, and South Australia. That and that heating of the landmass above the magma in turn creates the heating of the atmosphere above the landmass. And that's why these terrible fires occurred last summer. But you won't be hearing about this or reading about this in the mainstream media. They don't want you to know what happened. This is from a headline in some journal, and I didn't produce the journal. It was dated January 2nd of this year. There's a similar unknown phenomenon off New Zealand, providing a spike in water temperature of up to 6 degrees above average in the massive Pacific Ocean, east of New Zealand. East of New Zealand is basically where that tectonic plate edge occurs. So that place lifts, the magma from the core rushes up and heats the water to 6 degrees. That's a huge amount in geophysical terms. But you would not have been told about that, of course not. This is from Zetatalk. Meanwhile, in nearby India, they are experiencing the coldest day on record for the state. January the 2nd. Coldest day on record in India. We're sweltering, we're suffering through these terrible bushfires. This wasn't reported, of course, and understandably, because all our attention was focused on the tragedy that was unfolding here in Australia. Bizarre extremes continued for Europe. Sweden experienced its warmest day on record for that date. Warmest day on record in the middle of winter in Europe. That's strange. But in Iceland, not that far away, he got hit by 145 mile per hour wind and 10 feet of driving snow that the livestock were buried up to their eyeballs. Extremes, my friends. Extremes of weather. Extremes of heat, extremes of cold, often occurring on the same day, not reported by the mainstream media. Okay, what about the Antarctic plate? Well, it remains rock solid. It's not moving anywhere, not moving up, not moving down. That means that those who know about what is to come have cast their little eye on Antarctica as being a safe haven for the future. Potential land grabs by the major powers on Earth. What we're not being told by the mainstream media, because they don't want us to know about it, is during the past few years, some very strange things have begun to surface from beneath the melting ice cap of Antarctica. Like this. What is this? Some snowplow go there and make this? No. Not so. Even stranger, the face in Antarctica. Anyone hear about this? It's been around about a year. But obviously, not newsworthy enough for the Age or the Herald Sun to report, obviously. Or the New York Times, or the Boston Globe, or the Washington Post. Yeah, who cares? Some big face in Antarctica, that's not news. Now, those of you who were around back in the 1980s, and I'm an old bloke, I'm 70 plus, we remember a gentleman named Richard Hoagland. He was a physicist, astronomer, used to work for NASA. He did some videos, wrote some books. The Face on Mars in the 1980s. Hoagland, any of you? Richard Hoagland? Interesting stuff, interesting guy. Well, guess what, folks? The face on Mars is not that dissimilar to the face on Antarctica, which we're not being told about, which occurred within the past year. Certain similarity. Does that mean that, oh my God, aliens came to Antarctica at some remote period, and they also went to Mars? And they did the same thing, namely constructed a huge face on Mars, the surface of Mars, in Antarctica? No, that's nonsense. That's a fairy tale. Can't be true. Can't be true. All right, what's the ultimate outcome or goal or whatever end result of the daily Earth wobble? Well, it's not pleasant to consider, but it's what they tell us, and personally I believe this is going to happen. A major pole shift of the Earth to about 90 degrees from what it is now, and that means that the new equator will go from Antarctica. Oh, that's another reason why the Chinese are interested in Antarctica, the Russians, the Americans. It's going to be equatorial paradise. If this map, after the pole shift, comes true, and we don't know, of course. Speculation, theory, whatever. No one knows for sure, only God herself might know. But it looks pretty good for New Zealand, doesn't it? Because the new Earth, or the equator, is going right between the North and the South Island. And we won't be doing too bad here in Australia either, because our little part in the neck of the woods, Victoria, will sort of have a climate similar to what I predict to be what Queensland has now. That's if this happens. I personally believe there's a good chance of it, but I can't be dogmatic about it, because maybe this is the 10% that Zeta Talk got wrong. So you can never be dogmatic about these predictions, especially major predictions like this. We just have to see how it works out. Here's how it looks from another perspective. Not so good for India and Sri Lanka, because they're gone. Not so good for Western Australia. That's gone as well. And here are the new continents: North America, South America, Africa, Asia. Not so good for Russia. Parts of China gone. Will this occur as depicted? I think it might, but only God really knows. We'll have to see. Talking about Australia specifically, here's the Zeta Talk prediction. Australia will be in a good and bad situation regarding the pole shift. The western two-thirds will suddenly go underwater, and that's because the western part of our Indo-Australian plate is sinking, whereas the eastern part, New Zealand and Eastern Australia, is moving up. The eastern half of Australia and New Zealand benefit from the plate movement, lifting up as India is plunged under the Himalayas. And so the mountains in Eastern Australia and New Zealand will afford safe living areas. Due to its attachment to the plate, including India, the continent, and Australia will both suffer and benefit from the coming pole shift. The western half of Australia will suddenly go under the waves. This will seem to the stunned residents as though a tidal wave was steadily moving inland, and where the crest of the wave will not at first be high, the waters will just keep rising until all not afloat are drowned. Those in boats may survive, though there's a risk of capsizing. My late spiritual teacher apparently had a vision of refugees from WA streaming into Adelaide. Now, she died in 2002. I don't know when she had that vision, so I can't confirm it, but I heard it from a reliable source that she had that vision. And of course, she could not date it. The dates of these visions or whatever prophetic images from the future, very, very hard to verify, very hard to pin down. It's what we're supposed to look like after the pole shift. Now, as I mentioned to Teresa, I do a little psychic work on the side. Psychic work is not my main thing, but I've asked my inner guides about this map, and what I've been told is it's not going to be quite this bad. The red areas are what are going to be submerged. It's not going to be quite this bad. Zetatalk is saying 675 feet, anything 675 or below, whatever that is in meters, 200, 250 meters, something like that. The information I'm getting is that you have to be at an elevation of about 100 meters to be safe. That means that where we live in Dalesford, which is, I don't know, a couple of 600 meters or whatever, that's nice. The Central Highlands of Victoria, they're a safe place. But for Melbourne and Geelong, I'm sorry, it's not looking very good, and we'll get to that a little bit later. So this is an approximation of what might happen. I don't think it's going to be quite as bad as this. Otherwise I wouldn't be in Dalesford, I'd be somewhere in the hills here. But the basic thing is that portions of this country are going to go underwater, according to the Zetatalk predictions for the pole shift and after. Will it actually happen like that? God only knows. Okay, this is a worm's eye view. If you're a worm on the Queensland border, the southern border of Queensland looking north, this is what you will see. There's India over here, which is basically gone. New Zealand over here, which is basically up. The Coral Sea, or Tasman Sea, I guess. And there's a bend up here, and there's a bend there. As New Zealand goes up, and the western part of the Indo-Australian plate goes down, there are going to be some bends. And this is a worm's eye view from the New South Wales border, the New South Wales Victoria border. Once again, a bend and a bend, Tasman Sea. Okay, if all that happens as predicted, the question then becomes, what will be the timeline? Becomes a billion-dollar, trillion-dollar, quadrillion-dollar question. When will this supposed to happen? Zetatalk has refused to give a timetable for these events to unfold. And I can't go into the reasons for that, too complex. Until recently, now this is from the lecture, the following slides are from the lecture I gave in 2019, October 2019. This is what I wrote then. 2019 will be the final year in which things will continue more or less normally as in the past. However, we witnessed a lot more extreme weather events, hot, cold temperatures right around the globe, and some extreme weather events, floods, hurricanes, droughts, quite destructive, sad to say. So 2019, basically the last normal year, more or less, in our lives. This is what I wrote in October of 2019 about 2020. Some of the early months will pass as normal. January, February, yes. But sometime in that year, cannot say when, the extreme weather events will start to cause some real havoc. And what has happened this year, which Zetatalk does not anticipate, very few people saw coming, I did not see coming, was the coronavirus, COVID-19 outbreak. And there's a lot of discussion about, is it true, is it not true, is it a hoax, is it a cover-up, or what are they trying, I mean, infinite speculation. Specific timetables will likely differ from nation to nation, but if you look at the news coming out now, last week, last month, it's not looking that good. Quite frankly, the world is under a lot of pressure, a lot of trauma. And some of it's due to the coronavirus, yes, and a lot of it is due to political upheaval, and of course the weather changes, which are getting worse and worse. Okay, in the year 2021, just around the corner, specifically in January 2021, Zeta predicts that Nibiru will become generally visible around the world. And that, of course, if it does happen, if, it's a big if, it'll be an earth-shaking event. From what they wrote in March of 2019, is a worldwide program that has had a deadline of 2021 in effect. Every country has one. They've been told via face-to-face meetings between heads of state, from the scientists, from the astronomers, this is the year when Nibiru will be close enough that denial is no longer feasible. All right, what are they doing about it? Well, the U.S. will be dealing with New Madrid by then. I'll explain that a bit later. Martial law programs with FEMA. Congress is irrelevant. Nor will the British Commonwealth function. The Queen in Scotland is dead and likewise relevant. By the way, the Queen has died or has been executed, but that's another story I can't go into, I'm sorry. It's a very interesting story. Excuse me?
I'm just saying, geez.
But I can't go into it. The second part of the lecture will discuss a little bit about the leaders being taken out and being replaced by body doubles or lookalikes. It's a fascinating subject. And controversial. Okay, if Nibiru becomes visible in January of next year, which is only a month away, say by the end of January the 30th, 2021, everyone looks up in the sky and says, oh, that's a little dot beside the sun. It's not moving away. What is that little dot beside the sun? It can't be a lens flare. It can't be a dust speck, because I'm seeing it with my own eyes. What is that? Astronomers, tell us. Oh, that's nothing. No, there's something out there. Well, that's Nibiru. That's actually Nibiru. But no worries, mate. It's not going to have any effect on you. Anyway, if the prediction comes to pass of Nibiru becoming generally visible, humanity will realize they've been betrayed by most astronomers, scientists, experts in climate change, and world leaders. And they've been lying to them for years, in fact decades, about the non-existence of Nibiru. In the meantime, they have been preparing secret hideouts and bunkers in many nations, stocked with food and supplies so they can survive the coming pole shift. Their plan is to merge after the big event to lead the remnants of their shattered nations and reassert their control. And in a nutshell, that's what a lot of world leaders are planning. And guess what? You and I have not been told about this by the mainstream media. Gee, I wonder why. I wonder why. What is my prediction for the year of the pole shift? I think it will be sometime in 2022. But don't quote me, because the reality, the God-honest reality, is that only God, Him, herself, is the only being that truly knows when it will happen. In regard to this, I should say that in earlier years, 2011 when I first started studying Zeta Talk, 2012, 2013, the Zetas expected these events to unfold a lot faster. So there has been a slowing down or a delaying of these events. And why do you think that might be? And here's where the spiritual people and spiritual practices of people around the earth come into focus. Because every time, friends, that you pray, every time that you meditate, every time that you manifest love and light and focus love and light in your meditations, your visualizations into this country, this leader, that leader, your family, your friends, your community, you're actually helping the forces of light to delay what is not a particularly pleasant scenario. That's why the work that George Neo and Magpie House is doing is so relevant, so important in my opinion. He is pumping out this information ceaselessly, tirelessly, on a weekly basis, sometimes more so, and encouraging humanity to follow the spiritual path. And that encouragement, that teaching is desperately needed in these times. We have been delaying the onset of these events, in my opinion. The people in the world who are spiritually polarized, which is not a majority, obviously, not a majority. But there are enough of us around who, through prayer, meditation, services, working for the light, working for love, have been able to delay some of this nastier stuff from happening. And that's why the spiritual work that we do, and other people do who follow other systems of belief, and the only thing that matters is those systems of belief are based on love and light. You can talk about differences in religion or belief till the cows come home, but if you find something that's focused on love, focused on light, that is a path with heart, as George mentioned in his introduction. Okay, we're at the end of part 1, so we'll take a break for about 35 minutes till about 7:35, and then we'll resume.
Thank you, Deb. That was very insightful. Thank you.